Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Marian Busfield of Engaging Curiosity. This channel is here to support teachers with evidence-based classroom management strategies. I loved my time in the classroom and was privileged to spend about 20 years with students in a variety of contexts. And I've done everything from being a homeschooling mom to a K-9 teacher to a special ed coordinator. So I really kind of have experienced the gamut. In that time, I've also been so privileged, especially as a special education coordinator, in addition to the required formal education, privileged to attend so many conferences where I had the privilege of learning from the best in their fields and asking them questions directly. And so I just look forward to sharing what I learned and then got to practice in the classroom with you. Today's topic is restorative justice in schools, also known as restorative practices. And I want to just discuss how implementing these practices can totally transform classroom dynamics and build that supportive classroom community and learning environment. Because really, as you implement these, your students will get that sense of safety, security, inclusion, and that they can really they are heard and they can be themselves and respected. So let's get started. So let's start with why. Why implement restorative practices? I will say that my first exposure came when I worked with the RCMP decades ago, otherwise known as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I was not directly involved in implementing restorative practices or restorative justice, as it would be called in the justice system, but I was aware of the powerful impact it can have in both the healing in both the victim and the perpetrator. And it's not necessarily for every situation, but it can be very powerful. And so in the classroom, it's a compassionate alternative to traditional discipline, and it focuses on healing and relationship building. And by using this approach, you're transforming conflicts into opportunities for growth, promoting accountability and inclusion within your class. And of course, as your students learn to listen and share their perspective, they're developing those skills, those lifelong skills that allow them to set boundaries, stand up for themselves, calm themselves while they're listening to a different perspective. And it's really very strong social emotional development for them. So, at the heart of restorative practices are key concepts like addressing harm, teaching accountability, and encouraging community participation. By implementing these principles, you're creating a respectful and inclusive environment, which is again essential for that social and emotional development that I just mentioned. Sometimes in the classroom, it can be pretty frustrating. There seems to always be something new, the next thing we have to do. So, implementing these practices may be easier than you think. Start by collaboratively creating clear classroom expectations. Wow, that's a bit of a mouthful. I didn't expect all that alliteration. But, anyways, so you're going to establish those clear expectations. Now, it doesn't matter if this is September or November or March. Get started, try it. Um, by including your students in the process of making the classroom expectations, they will take more of an ownership of the classroom culture. That's the beginning of them really feeling heard and respected for their input. So when students are involved in establishing these rules, it also creates a shared language and that understanding, which makes it way easier to address and involve conflicts, resolve, not involve conflicts when they arise. The next step is to incorporate circle discussions into your daily or weekly routine. And these discussions can provide the structured yet flexible framework where every student has the opportunity to speak and listen in an atmosphere of equality and respect. Over time, as students become more comfortable sharing in this format, they will naturally engage more openly and honestly. And that's going to lay the groundwork for true restorative dialogue, which sounds is a very formal way of saying if you have to sit down with them at, well, in my classroom, it was at my desk, and talk to them about a problem that they're having, that they've come to you with, that groundwork of sharing their thoughts, their feeling has been laid. They're more comfortable doing that. They've learned to speak up, and it can be in really simple conversations at the carpet where they've learned to feel safe and heard. So the list for mediation steps does look a little bit longer, but they basically boil down to it becomes quite a simple process. So you create a safe and welcoming environment, and you're going to begin with introductions. Now, that may or may not be necessary, and it can look different things in different situations. If I have to resolve conflict in the playground during recess, the students may be from other classes. They may or may not know each other. They're likely to know of each other in a smaller school, but they may not know each other's name. So you want to begin with that, and you may not know their name. Let's make sure you know each student's name because, of course, that is part of their security is being seen as an individual. And then you encourage each student to share their perspective without interruption, and that's your job. So you're going to utilize reflective listening to validate emotions and identify the core issues. Okay, so next up is facilitating a dialogue that encourages collaborative problem solving. Encourage them to work together to solve something together. Are they fighting over the sandbox? Are they fighting over the swing? Do they want to do a project differently in the classroom? Are they, confused about whose turn it is? So have them problem solve. And ultimately, you want them to come to their own agreement that everybody feels invested in. And of course, depending on the experience they have, the time of the year, whether or not the prior classroom did it, whether or not they've experienced it, whether or not they see this at home, and whether or not they understand emotional maturity, whether or not they actually solve the problem and come up with an agreement, we're going to take that a step at a time. It's not necessarily going to happen the first time, but with your help and with your input and with your direction, hopefully you'll come up with something that everyone feels they can invest in. Closure is essential, and you're going to want to follow up to ensure that the solutions are working and the relationships are truly mended. And it could be as simple as going out, when they come in from recess the next day and go, how'd it go today? Excellent. I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate. And when you consistently apply these steps, you'll be cultivating an environment where students not only expect, but also appreciate collaborative problem solving. This approach not only benefits the classroom management, but as I said, builds this resilient classroom community that thrives on mutual respect and understanding. And you really are developing some very strong, healthy social emotional skills within your students. So my classroom was typically a pretty calm, collaborative place. When my students interacted, they were generally fairly kind and supportive of each other. However, after recess, I definitely heard about the transgressions that had occurred outside. And I've had years where I didn't really have to have my students sit at my desk to resolve conflicts much at all after recess. But there was definitely one year that really stood out. I had two girls who were both leaders and friends. So, you've heard of frenemies, I'm sure. Anyways, my response was always similar. I can understand why you are, and then I would insert the feeling that they were sharing, that I was hearing in their voice. Let's have everyone meet at my desk with their snacks or lunch to discuss it. So then we would sit at my little kidney taped little desk, the kind that you use for small groups in the classroom. And that's the closest thing I would have to a circle at that point in the day. Um, I gave everyone a chance to share their own version of the story. I intervened on interruptions and held the space for them. I gave reminders that everyone would get their own turn, that they needed to be listening. I acknowledged what feelings I observed, and I asked everyone how they could have handled things differently. Okay, of course, we're all pretty sure that they're not really hearing necessarily the perspective of the other person if they're highly dysregulated, even when you've given them a chance to calm down a bit and regulate. They're just waiting, especially in the younger grades, for their turn to change to share their part of the story. So you're going to help them to learn the perspective of the other person by reviewing the kind of Cliff Notes version with them. And then, after two have shared and had a chance to do maybe a little bit of a rebuttal, depending on the context. You're going to initiate brainstorming for how to get everyone back to a place where they felt safe and respected. And sometimes the resolution included apologies, sometimes it really does not. Because, as an important note here, I never forced apologies because we're teaching children how to live here. To be truly sorry, a person's actions must align with their words. I cannot force a child's actions. I mean, I can have authority in the classroom and I can say, I really want you to, you must get your math done. And I can enforce that to a certain extent, but honestly, I want them to connect with their feelings and learn to reflect and choose to understand what it means to treat others right and wrong. And sometimes that can take a bit, but you do see growth. I remember doing an activity with a whole class, and it wasn't even about resolving conflict, but it was about bullying and the bullying the bystander and the support person. And somebody that would intervene, and they did a reflection, and all their entire written reflection, we had read a story together, and then their written reflection says, choose one of those roles, a situation that you've really been in, choose one of those roles, and identify the name of the role and who you were in it and why you believe that you were taking that part in the role. And I had one student who just couldn't write it. And he was a really cute kid, but he also liked to get his own way. And he wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. And finally, towards the end of the block, he didn't write down much because he hadn't left himself much time, but he chose to write about being a bully. And he had taken most of the time of they were in grade 5, so he had like good 40 minutes to do some writing on this. He had taken, I'm sorry, about 20 minutes to do the writing on this, but he had taken easily 15 to 17 minutes of the time to really wrestle through whether or not he wanted to choose to write about the bully role. And then he did, and it was a very brief reflection, but what a powerful activity. My point is here to demand an apology when your students haven't really had a chance to process. They've had a chance to listen, to understand a little bit, but really process their part in it, especially if you're talking to little ones. That's way too quickly for a lot of them. So forcing an apology is just never something I was comfortable with. Not authentic to me for sure. Restorative practices in schools offer a multitude of benefits that extend beyond mere discipline. When we nurture a culture of empathy and collaboration, these practices significantly promote inclusion, and that ensures that every student is going to feel valued and heard, regardless of their background or experiences. This inclusive environment directly contributes to boosting academic gains as students spend more time engaged in learning rather than facing punitive measures that isolate or exclude them. Also, students develop essential conflict resolution skills, and I've mentioned this before. They've been learning to navigate disagreements through understanding and dialogue rather than confrontation. Remember, they may have learned something else outside of your classroom. When we equip students with the ability to resolve conflicts independently, not only are we empowering them with lifelong social emotional skills that enhance personal growth and professional success, we're also bringing a calmer classroom environment into our classroom because as the year goes on, they'll practice these more and more, and you will be involved less and less. That is my experience. Of course, I can't guarantee anything about your context. As they learn to see issues from these multiple perspectives, though, and negotiate solutions together, they do become more empathetic, and that creates the supportive and cooperative classroom experience that, again, leads to that calm that I'm talking about. And by using this approach, you're not only improving the individual student outcomes, but also strengthening the classroom community as a whole. And this leads to a more positive and effective learning environment for everyone involved. And it has carried through in the students, even though as they go on to other classrooms, they're not in that same context. It kind of settles into their spirit and they have felt inclusion, which strengthens them to to feel their own worthiness in other classrooms going forward. And so the blessings of this really do hold. So to really highlight the impact of restorative practices on classroom community, just to review, your students are going to feel respected, trusted, valued, and heard. This will go a long way towards mitigating disparities and supporting that kind of equitable learning for all. So that's a pretty good list. And it's good to remember that by integrating these restorative practices into your classroom, you will be creating resilient, inclusive communities that benefit your students absolutely, but they bring that calmer classroom that benefits you as well. Restorative practices are a powerful tool in creating a healthy classroom and community, and then classroom community is an essential part of effective evidence-based classroom management. For more on how to transform your classroom management, download my free classroom management checklist to help you implement these strategies effectively and see the positive changes in your classroom dynamics. You can do that by using the QR code right here. Sure, we know how to do that. And of course, there's a bit.ly link above. And actually, I've included the direct link in the description down below. So you've got lots of options there. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to having you join me again, and you will see some suggested videos on the screen. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss an update. But it also helps me to get out there to more teachers who also need support. And I thank you for joining me. Bye for now.